Oh,
Hey, I don't know how I got kicked off. Somehow I got kicked off, and I'm like, okay, well, we rejoined. It's all right. We're
we're
here.
here.
It's all right. I
We still have two
love
minutes to go, so
technology. We are born in Silicon Valley, and I love technology, our
yeah,
company. So, yeah,
don't be wild.
but
All right. I mean, it's almost 2 minutes. Should we just start?
I say let's just join. Yep, I say let's start.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Tanay. I am the community reporter for India Currents. For those of you who don't know us, we are a small digital magazine and newsroom, and we mostly cover stories about the Desi community, Indian Americans, a little bit of what's happening back home in South Asia. And this is actually the first in a series of events that we're going to bring your way. It's called the Chai and Chat series, and we're kicking it off with a very special guest. We have with us the one and only drumroll Jasbina Ahluwalia. She is a dating coach and matchmaker extraordinaire. She's been running her own matchmaking service called Intersections Match for almost 2 decades now, right, Jasbina?
Well, 2 decades is a lot. Well, why don't we say over a decade? 2 decades is giving it is being generous, but yes. Actually,
Right.
almost since 2007.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, so
Yeah.
not far from.
Yeah, just 3 more
Absolutely.
years. And we're really excited to have you, of course, and we're excited to have everyone who's tuned in. We have a lot of, I know I have a lot of questions. I know that our viewers have a lot of questions. But before we jump right into it, just a few housekeeping instructions for everyone who's joining and has questions. You can type your questions in the questions tab, which will be on the bottom right, I'm guessing. So those questions will come directly to us, the moderators. Whatever you type in the comments tab will be visible to everyone. So if you have any specific questions that you'd like us to tackle, or like Jasbina to tackle, you can just post them in the questions tab. But feel free to comment in the comment section if you just have an interesting thought about what we're talking about and have something you want to share, because we will be looking at the comments tab as well. So having said that, let's just jump into it.
Excellent.
All right. So the first question I have is actually about COVID. I mean, Instagram lives and Zooms, we only know, I mean, a lot of us started doing these things really seriously because of the pandemic, and
Sure.
a lot of people's plans were disrupted. I myself know a few people whose wedding plans were disrupted. But I know that people also came up with really innovative ways to get married and sort of keep the wedding industry going. What was your experience with matchmaking and being in this world during COVID?
Well, you know what? I think that's a really great question because I mean, COVID is life, right? And life happens. And I think that's a really, really important thing to keep in mind because I'm a big believer that, let's not let our external circumstances dictate too much of what we make of our lives. So I have a great inspiration. I have something inspirational for anyone who kind of feels frustrated, right? With sort of what's happening externally coming in the way of their reaching their goals, getting where they want to be in life. And so this is one of our clients who is, if anyone has an excuse for being busy, right, during a global pandemic, it's a physician who is a critical care physician, right? Because we knew the ICUs, the critical care units were
Yeah,
really hammered, right,
yeah.
during this global pandemic. So I found myself really gratified at the Zoom wedding, my very
Hmm.
first Zoom wedding of a client who happened to be a critical care physician who was marrying and Florida based, East Coast based, marrying someone she'd established a relationship with. She got to know prior to the pandemic, but kept that relationship going during the pandemic. You know what I'm saying? Despite unprecedented hours,
Yeah.
right, of work, despite, the emotional, the physical toll that that pandemic took, not only personally, but professionally, and to a fiance who was, on the other coast in California.
Wow.
So I think that is really a testament to, the cliche of if there's a will,
Yeah.
there's a way. And so I love that inspirational story, and I share it with, with clients, the people who are feeling like, you know, I put in there, frustrated with any number of external things. I mean, we are, our clientele tends to be leaders in their industries. So they have deadlines all the time. They have, work is always there. There's so many demands on all of us these days, but keeping love in the forefront, keeping one's personal life in the forefront is how we achieve in our personal life as well as other areas of life. So,
Wow. That's a lot of invariables. Let's say, so we have someone who's working in the healthcare industry in the middle of COVID, marrying someone who's on another coast in the middle of a lockdown. So that's, yeah, kudos to them.
well, what? Here's the thing, and it's not just a physician, right? Someone in critical care. If we
Mhm.
go back to, right, like who wants to go back to the pandemic? But if we just do a thought experiment and
Let's
go
not,
back there,
let's please
we
not.
think that of all the people who, would say, you know what, I'm going to shelf my personal life for now. That's one of the groups that we would say, maybe we might actually excuse them. But no, I think that also, but on the flip of that, I think it also reminds us that tomorrow's not promised, right? For anybody. So I think that pandemic did that for us. And so for those for whom living life in partnership really is a life goal, I think, right? That's almost more of a reason to say, you know what? We're not promised a tomorrow. So let's make things happen in our life despite.
Right. Yeah, that actually that also neatly segues into my next question, which is also related to COVID. Another thing that happened during the pandemic was that the world witnessed what a glimpse or a slice of what Indian matchmaking is like through the hit Netflix show creatively called Indian Matchmaking. What was I'm just curious. It's caused quite. It's become very popular. People know it. The characters have made a lot of money, and they're really big celebrities of their own now. I'm curious, as someone who's worked within the matchmaking space and with the Indian American community, what did you think of the show? What was your reaction to it?
Sure. Well, sure. Anything in the diaspora, definitely that's a show worth talking about. So a number of things, right? So one, right, as a mother and a matchmaker, I will also say that um, our kids were remote learning during that time, and they were young. They were elementary school, sent home, just in a second, right, to start remote learning, which candidly, they did a little Netflixing, right? Instead of English, instead of math, and that kind of thing. So we killed Netflix pretty fast, right? As soon as we learned what was going on, we decided probably Netflix was not a temptation we needed in our house during remote learning. So I didn't have Netflix when Indian matchmaking first came
Okay.
out. And so when press started asking my opinion about it, I thought, well, I really need to, right? I really need to check this show out.
Hmm.
So we got Netflix back, and I binged, I think probably in about 40 hours, I binged the whole season
We've
one.
all
Okay.
been
So I thought it was very entertaining in a lot of ways. I thought the comments about being cringeworthy, I take that also. I think those really good points there. But one thing that did happen is things started looking really familiar in some way. So I went back to emails because I saw the name of the executive producer, and that sounded familiar to me, and the whole concept sounded a little bit familiar. So I went back to emails going back, over a decade, like years and years ago, and I noticed that did an interview. So I am proudly an Auntie Sima reject. And the reason I say proudly is because when I went back to those emails, what I saw were a lot of questions about matrimonial practices, a lot of things that candidly I didn't really resonate with as an Indian American lawyer turned matchmaker. So someone who prior to doing matchmaking, right, was out there and in the professional world, right? And as a female in the professional world, right, raised by parents who immigrated from abroad with the mindset that they wanted to really take the best of the East and the best of
Mhm.
the West, what they perceived as the best of, you know, the amazing country they left of India, and then bring it and bridge it with what they saw as the most exciting things about the US and why they came here.
Right.
And they really wanted to create an experience like that for themselves and their family. So myself and my two sisters, I think, were raised with that idea of, you know, really picking what they perceived as the best of both cultures and what we wanted to take from both cultures.
Mhm.
And there were certain aspects, right, as daughters, as Indian women, that I would say that we probably didn't want, right, in terms of certain things, right? And there were certain things that we absolutely did want from the culture. And so that really, that's pretty much my take. There are things that I learned about only through frankly my matchmaking process about certain ideas that I think some people, right, in the culture might have that. And then I've always wanted, you know, as an Indian American lawyer, there are a lot of progressive ideas that really resonated with me. So in terms of why I even created this, you know, this company was really based on this mission of progressive matchmaking for Indian Americans. So I
Mhm.
think that's, you know, it kind of sums up some of
Right.
my views of a very entertaining show that I think was very thought provoking and had a lot of us thinking about a lot of things.
Right. Yeah. And it was sort of a, I think it sort of ushered in a moment for India itself. India sort of started having a cultural moment right after that. It just became a pop culture thing. But anyway, so while you're talking about your matchmaking process and how it's maybe a little different from what we see or what we saw on screen, uh, we have a question from Anjana, and she wants to know if the parents and the young folks, do they want to get like, do they have different expectations about the process? Who exactly is your client most times? Do the parents come to you saying, "Hey, I want to look for a match for my son or daughter," or is it the people wanting to get married themselves? Can you just walk us through how that process works?
Sure. So, in terms of to the point of how do people, right? So, we have people who are looking to be partnered themselves, 20s all the way to 70s plus, right? So, to begin with, right, varied ages. But in terms of that, so the person themselves will come to us, as does the family. But what's one thing that's really important is when the family comes, which we welcome it, as we all know, right? One of the assets of our culture is how invested families are
Oh
with
yeah.
respect to our well-being, right? And it can be a double-edged sword. I will say it's the biggest asset. It can be a liability as well. I will be really, as a mother, I will say it can be both. But in terms of how invested and how that support structure that we have is really fortunate, right? So from that perspective, support structures, our families, siblings, parents, sometimes are the first line of inquiry. What's really important about our process, though, is that we do deal directly with the individual looking to be matched. So we start with a whole assessment, which is always, as you know, no exception made, always done independently with the person looking to be matched. And that is to keep integrity of the process. As I mentioned, I was a lawyer, you know, a lawyer still, and I was a lawyer before starting this process. And so the whole confidentiality, that whole idea that, you know, there needs to be a sacred trust
Mhm.
and a sacredness to the interactions between the, you know, the matchmaker and the person looking to be matched, where their confidence and privacy is upheld, right? It's really important that once the assessment begins, that everything, right, all the intimate details, everything that is shared by a client is theirs to share with anyone they want. But once it's transmitted to me, I share it nowhere else. So from that perspective, it is very much, you know, the individual is guiding that, and they are welcome to bring their family in at any, you know, share any part of the process. But the sharing really comes from our clients to their family, not from me to their family. And if if that helps in terms of the first line, the inquiry comes from everywhere, but in terms of who we work with is the person themselves, whether they're 20s all the way up to
Right.
70s plus.
Right.
Yeah.
So you work with your clients, and I think the key must be to sort of strike a balance with the older generation and the generation that's looking to get married.
So it's interesting when you say strike a balance, right? I I don't see it quite that way in terms of strike a balance. What I see it as is I encourage everyone to live their lives driven by their values, right? Their values should be the compass as to their decision making, whether it's to their personal life, whether it's to their career. Their decision making day to day should be driven by their values. Now, values, right? To the extent that they, you know, we come from our families, and I think our families very much, right? One of the biggest influences, right, on us. That doesn't necessarily mean we adopt our family's values wholesale,
Right.
100%. I think that if we is if we as adult children, right, have values that are not exactly the same as our parents, have expectations that are not exactly the same as our parents, I think respectful dialogue on that is more valuable than adopting wholesale other people's values. I think that can run into problems in establishing a family of one's own. So I think that it's not as much a matter of balancing as a much of having clarity with respect to what's important to somebody, having dialogue with respect to that respectfully with a family when there's a disconnect in any level in that, and then letting one's values drive their decision making.
Right.
Does that make
Perfect.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Um, and we could only get 14 minutes before we got a question about dating tips. So,
Great. Right.
so not really dating tips, but a question that we have from, I think, Preetharam00 is that could you talk about concrete advice for today's singles, older, professionally successful, Indian, and not too traditional? And they would also like to know more about what you mean by progressive matchmaking. So if you could just talk about that a little bit.
Well, so progressive matchmaking is really about not feeling beholden to the expectation of others when they do not, when they're not consistent with your own values. Yes. And that could be any number of things. All right. In terms of giving importance to things that really do not connect with who you are as a person, who you aspire to be as a person. So that's what I'll say with respect to that. In terms of concrete dating, well, so I think that a huge, um, there's quite a bit of diversity, right? I mean, that's a given. When someone who is non-Indian asks me about India, we have to start with how diverse our subcontinent is, right? On multiple levels. And that diversity is not only about different languages, different food habits, different subcultures, but it also is about different diversity of thought, right? And I think that not respecting the level of diversity of thought that we have is is something that is to our own you know, is not helpful to us as people. So I think that what we need to understand is as Indians, for example, I was born and raised in the US. I never resonated with ABCD. I never considered myself an ABCD.
Huh.
I know very many people who immigrated from India who don't associate with being an FOB, right? A fob. So I think that some of these labels need to be thrown out, right? I think that trying to label each other is not progressive, right? If we're going to start there.
Right.
In terms of, and that's something that I'll say, in terms of somebody, in terms of concrete dating advice, one would be let's leave preconceived notions. Let's not let that guide our decision making. What I mean by that is we have so many perception biases as humans, right? One of them is, let's say, if we do something, right, that seems, if we make a mistake even, right, if something happens, forget mistake, if something happens that doesn't in the real world, right, that is, it's something happens and we don't resonate, right, with the circumstance there. Oftentimes we as humans will say, we'll chalk it up to, oh, you know what? Yes, let me say a concrete example, being late, right? Someone's late to something. They might say, I was late, but you know what? It was because, and they'll think of the circumstances that led to it. They won't adopt that, I'm someone who's always late. They won't adopt any of that. They'll just, circumstances happened. and and this happened, right? On the flip side of that, sometimes early stages of getting to know someone and dating, someone's late. We automatically, oh, they must not respect my time.
Hmm.
Oh, they just must be irresponsible. They must be, right? We sort of ascribe meanings to that, that maybe are jumping to conclusions, right? That aren't really gonna help us connect with anybody in that sense. So that's kind of a good example of a perception bias, where we ascribe to the other person. It's a character issue, and
Hmm.
to ourselves a circumstance. And I think that happens a lot in dating, in early stages of dating. So in terms of something concrete for, professionals who obviously value their time, they need to and they should. Sometimes we get lost in that kind of a thing. So one, not letting our own values guide us, and instead feeling the expectations of others needs to guide societal expectations, expectations in any level, needing to guide our decision making more than is well serving. Two, jumping to conclusions. Three, labeling people, labeling things before giving them a chance to really understanding multidimensionally what is going on there. So those are three big examples. Another one is swinging the pendulum. This is something that I did.
Hmm.
Okay, so I like to say that some of the biggest mistakes in dating were made by me. Right? It's not. No one is perfect, and certainly from that perspective, I was one of those people who swung the pendulum. Right? Swinging the pendulum means that dismissing people too fast. Right? On a first date, at really early stages of dating, before there's any chance for any bonding to develop, before we really even understand who somebody else is, kind of just swinging that pendulum. The other thing that can happen is swinging the pendulum the other way, where we are not, we're continuing to entrench in something where there's no light at the end of the tunnel, right? There are yellow flags or red flags we're not seeing. We're getting emotionally emotionally involved in something, and we're dismissing things, throwing them under the rug. So those are some of the most common mistakes that someone's education is not shielding them from.
Right.
So being a high level, professional is not shielding one from making those mistakes at all. Is that making sense?
Yeah, I think that's very well said. Yeah. That's really sage advice. And just a reminder to everyone who's watching, you feel free to send in questions. We already have a list of a few questions, but the sooner you send it in, the larger the chance that we'll get to it before it ends. The next question is about the clients that come to you. Do they come with certain criteria in mind? And what advice do you give them when they come up with criteria? And what sort of parameters are realistic, so to say, when trying to find a partner through a matchmaking service?
So let's talk about just trying to find a partner, right? As opposed to through a matchmaking service. And then we can talk about but in terms of finding a partner, I am a big believer, right, in having deal breakers and must haves and having them to maximize the chances of getting your must haves, being flexible about everything around that, right? So in terms of the must haves, right, I'd like them to be values driven, right? As opposed to driven by what someone thinks someone should have, right? The shoulds, I think, have limited place, right? When we're talking about something as high stakes as finding someone you're going to share the rest of your life with, okay? So from that perspective, the must-haves are something that I suggest everyone ask their why. So we put down, right? What is a must-have? Okay, let's say someone's must-have is, you know, here's one. I want someone who's a fellow physician. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. A fellow physician. Let's dig deeper, right? Why do we want someone who is a physician? Let's even say not even fellow, but a physician. Okay. Because sometimes people say, I want a physician. Okay. Why is this a must have for somebody? And for someone, the must have, they're conjuring certain things up. Oh, physician. Well, if it's a physician, then they clearly have a work ethic. Okay. They clearly can work hard. Okay. So, but what we're distilling that down to is a work ethic. That's what you really want in a partner. Okay. Are there any other lines of work where we see a work ethic, right? And then, right, This is a way that we can expand a pool. And if we expand a pool, we expand the possibilities of getting everything else that we want on that must-have list, right? So what else about, oh, financially stable. Okay. Are there any other lines of work where we find that financial stability, right? Ability to, ability to commit to something, all number of things that people conjure up with respect to that. Someone with good character, what have you. Another thing is, I really do like to our clients to audit, even why do we want an Indian, right?
Mhm.
Someone, people, sometimes it's a misnomer. I've had matchmakers come in and say, okay, is this about only Indians needing to be with Indians? And absolutely not. Frankly, when I was dating as an Indian American, I'm very comfortable in the Indian mainstream culture, and I dated Indian. I dated non-Indian as well.
Right.
And so for me, it's a matter of, okay, why only Indian or why not Indian? We have clients who come to us who don't prefer Indians as well. But let's say the person says, I must be with an Indian. Okay, great. Let's explore that further. Why is that? Now, if that person, again, well, because Indians are family centric, family is very important to me. Okay, let's explore that further. Are there any other cultures where, family is important? Or if someone says, well, it's really important that they speak this language. Okay, now it's a little different. And why is that important? Okay, well, because, and then we go explore it deeper. There are no rights and wrongs, okay? I operate what I consider a very judgment-free zone, okay? It's a safe space. There are very few judgment-free zones, I think, in this world today. We operate one of them, all right?
Right.
And so one can say anything they want. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of effectiveness. And let's explore that further. And again, not to the vantage point of it's right to want this, it's wrong to want that, but more from how can we maximize the chances that you get what you want by really, really distilling what you want down
Mhm.
so we're not ending up with, the one of a million chances. Because once we have certain things, we also want certain other things that sometimes we don't think about, right? Kindness, right? That is someone who's gonna be there
Right.
for us, right? So
Mhm.
we want that, and to get that, there are other trade-offs we might be making. Deal breakers, again, sometimes people think, oh, I have no deal breakers. I'm very flexible. No, it's important to have some deal breakers, right? But if we have too many deal breakers, no deals get made. So from that perspective, I'm a big fan of auditing your list and just really seeing what's the why behind that?
Mhm.
Is there any other way to get that met? And if not, yeah, this is an essential must have for us. If it's a need, it may be an essential must have. Is there any way we can meet that need apart from this person?
Right.
Another question to ask, right?
So have
So.
must-haves, have deal breakers. Just be sure of why you have them, basically.
Right, right. And be willing to, when someone says I don't know
Hmm.
to an answer to a question I ask, I love that answer. It's time to explore that. If you're ever going to explore, it's before you make a commitment.
Right.
So that's,
Got
I love I don't knows. Okay. It's like
it.
great. It will, that I don't knows we explore further, then we'll know, right?
Right.
Before we make a commitment.
All
Yeah.
right. So now
Okay.
we're quickly running out of time. Maybe we can do two more questions.
Sounds
So
good.
one, can you quickly walk us through, since you've already talked about how you approach a potential match, could you quickly walk us through the rest of the process? So how does a match process go from start to finish?
Well, the start is what we are just talking about, right? It's a high level of introspection to start with, high level of seeing what clarity someone has to begin with, and I think we have to start here. We have to start with um, first of all, people who come to us, right? They don't aspire to an arranged marriage because if you aspire to an arranged marriage, and there's nothing wrong, frankly speaking, um, I think arranged marriages can be beautiful, right? My parents had one, a beautiful arranged
Yeah.
marriage. However, the clients who come to us, similar to myself, that they want to have feelings for their partner prior to making that commitment, right? So that is really why one of the reasons a lot of people come to us. They want to have an alternative to an arranged marriage, okay? So if there's going to be an alternative to arranged marriage, we need to start with, okay, if we're not going to go to arranged marriage, we're not going to use
Mhm.
proxies then. We're not going to say that, okay, if someone else is, pick any religion, Hindu, Sikh, Jain, it doesn't, Muslim, it doesn't matter, right? Um, Old school, maybe arranged marriage says, well, if you're Hindu, I'm Hindu. Well, clearly we're going to have the same views on ABC.
Mhm.
I say, no, 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 no. Every religion, right? Any religion. There are so many different ways to practice that religion. There are so many different, even belief systems and ways we practice within that, that we're not even going to, I don't, someone being Hindu means very little to me. Okay, you're Hindu. Okay, now let's explore deeper, right? You're Hindu. What does that mean for you? What are any practices you have currently? What are any practices you want to have if you want children in the future? What are practices you might want them to be exposed to? What are practices you might want to share with your spouse? All of those are super important, right, to start with. So first of all, we don't even get to any who the other person is till we really have a higher level of understanding of who we are and our patterns from our past relationships,
Right.
right? Once we hit that, then we're ready, right, to meet others. And when we meet others, we're going to take everything that we already learned, and we're going to be exploring further, and we're going to be refining that. So I think that's what's really important is this is a process. If anything that you get from what I just said, it's that this is not a transactional kind of we're just, a matrimonial broker kind of a situation where we're just taking people and putting them together. This is very much a high stakes situation. We are filling the
Mhm.
most important role someone is going to have in your life, which is that of your life
Right.
partner, right? So for that, we're going to start with who we are. We're going to then learn things in the lab of actually, right? Dating, right? Because the whole idea of dating to find a partner is a whole different ball game, right?
Mhm.
That is in terms of it being a process. So have a feeling that I know that we're getting close to time. I
Yeah.
have a feeling that we're going to need to do this again.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely.
we're going to need to do this again. We're going to need to go deeper because I know that there is a lot more about matchmaking we haven't even touched
Oh,
on.
yeah.
But if the take home here is it is a process and it starts with oneself, then that is exactly what I think is most responsible for me to convey over
No,
here.
that's awesome. That's really flips the narrative because matchmaking is perceived to be looking outwards and sending out feelers for look outwards for other people, and you're saying that it sort of starts with yourself, which is awesome.
Absolutely. I think anything high stakes in one's life does need to start with a understanding of
Yeah,
oneself.
that does
Absolutely.
make, yeah, that even makes intuitive sense. It sort of right. So I think we have time for one more question, and this is a fun one. It's from Sanjana. Um, it's have any deal breakers or must-haves surprised you?
Have any deal breakers you must have some. Oh my goodness. There's so many. Okay, you know what? This is how I'm gonna answer that. Okay. I will say that any given thing. And because we said the doctor thing, and because that's kind of a joke, right? That, people say, oh, all Indians are doctors, right? Or what have you. Or this is what surprises me that something as sort of, you might say, innocuous as the fact that someone's profession is medicine, right? Um, I have heard two diametrically opposed, right, positions, characterizations of somebody just based on the fact that they're a
Hmm.
physician, meaning people who, I only want a physician. Why? Well, because, they will clearly be, and they, espouse all of these terms. They will clearly be someone who's kind and nurturing and, hardworking and all these different things. And then hearing from somebody else, possibly the very same day, anybody but a physician. I don't want to. Why? Again, why? Because, a physician is just one aspect of who this person is.
Right.
Well, the physician, well, if they're a physician, they obviously can't think outside of the box. They obviously just toe the line. They obviously just do what everyone expects. both are extremely unfair, in my opinion, right? So the deal breaker being someone a physician or the must have being someone a physician, both is extremely ill serving, I think. I think instead we look again at the whys. Why are we saying this? Who are there exceptions to that? And that is kind of, and by the way, you can insert instead of physician, vegetarian. Oh my gosh, you can't be healthy unless you're vegetarian. Or if you're vegetarian, you can't be athletic or what have you. It is astounding to me, which is why I'm a big believer in preconceived notions and fantasies way coming in the way of organically connecting.
Right. All right. I think that's a great note to end on. Unfortunately, this is all the time that we have today. But as you said, Jasbina, clearly we need to have more of these in order to get through all the questions.
I would love that. And I would love intergenerational dialogue. So,
Mhm.
whoever is here, I would love you to, for the next time, invite your friends, people in your age group. I would love you to invite people older and younger. Let's get some dialogue
Mhm.
going. That's what I would
Yeah,
love to do.
I think that'll be a nice, spicy conversation.
Absolutely. And we did one of those at the OPI conference years
Mhm.
ago, and I would love to do it again.
All right.
So, yes.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And keep watching the space. We will be having more such events, and follow Jasbina, follow India Currents, and hope to see you soon.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining, everyone. And yes, thank you
All
so
right.
much. Okay, bye bye.